All right, so we're going to be in John chapter 4. We're going to be the end of John chapter 4 into John chapter 5. And I'll kind of hit this again when we come to it a little bit later. What we're going to be working with two different kind of miracles tonight, where Jesus interacts with people in their life, and we're going to see that. And so just kind of catch you back up from where we left off. Jesus had left Jerusalem, and he was a little further west from Jerusalem, and he was healing, and he was teaching, and he was baptizing, and there was a dispute that was started by one of the Jews, which means Pharisees. And basically, John the Baptist had gone further north, and so there was this little dispute about, well, Jesus is baptizing more than you, and this is happening, and y'all need to be upset about that. And so Jesus leaves that place, and he goes into Samaria. And he has the encounter with the Samaritan woman, what ultimately leads to the Samaritan people coming to faith in him. He spent 2 days there teaching and preaching, and many people come to faith. And what we're going to be dealing with tonight is just in connection to that, he then begins to go back near his hometown. He's going to end up being in Cana again, where he did the first miracle we saw in the book of John, turning the water into wine. He's going to be back at Cana again to do another miracle. And one of the things that we're going to, as we work through tonight, what we're going to see, and this is the same thing that we've been talking about, is the whole book of John and everything that we have there is structured where Jesus is pushing people to believe. And I don't mean pushing them literally. He's trying to get into their life and move them forward in their understanding of who God is, what God does, and ultimately that he's the Messiah. And so that helps us as we read the book of John to kind of understand his interactions and why he's doing what he's doing and why he's saying what he's saying and how he's approaching people. We have to remember that everything that he's doing is to move people forward in faith, ultimately for them to believe in him and to follow him, okay? And so we're going to talk about miracles tonight a little bit. We'll kind of pick it up more next week too. And I want to go ahead and preface this. In John chapter 5, we're going to talk about a miracle. We're not going to cover the whole thing tonight because it's a lot in John chapter 5 that we'll pick up next week. So there's a big question in there about the Sabbath. And so I want to go ahead and prep you, and I'll hit this again later. We're not going to cover the Sabbath part of that tonight. We will come back and talk about it, I promise. But tonight, we just want to deal with the miracle, okay? So let's start in John chapter 4, verse 33, and we're going to talk about a faith that pleases God. And I want to put this out there too that we can be thinking about. Hebrews 11:1 says, without faith, it's impossible to please God, right? Or 11:6. And so you have to know what kind of faith that is and what that means. And so what Jesus is doing is drawing out faith that pleases God. And faith that pleases God is faith that believes in his Messiah and then follows him. That's pleasing faith, okay? And so you're going to see Jesus drawing that out of people tonight in different ways. So let's start, and we'll read through, and then we'll come back and we'll work through. And of course, as always, if you have questions, stop me. We can discuss. We're not in any hurry to rush through anything. We want to make sure we got everything covered. But let's start reading. After the 2 days, he went forth from there into Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they themselves also went to the feast. Therefore he came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and was imploring him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. The royal official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go, your son lives. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started off. As he was now going down, his slaves met him, saying that his son was living. So he inquired of them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the hour in which Jesus said to him, Your son lives, and he himself believed, and his whole household. This is again a second sign that Jesus performed when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So we'll stop there and work through this miracle, and then we'll kind of come back. Actually, no, let's go ahead and read the second one so we can kind of do them all together. John 5:1. After these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. A man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your pallet, and walk." Immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. Now it was the Sabbath on that day. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, "It's the Sabbath, and it's not permissible for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Pick up your pallet and walk.'" And they asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Pick up your pallet and walk'?" Now, we'll come to this later, but notice they didn't ask the question about who was the man that healed you. They weren't concerned about the healed body. They were concerned that he was carrying a pallet, But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you've become well. Do not sin anymore so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I myself am working." So we have these two really beautiful miracles that we see here, and we're going to kind of unpack those tonight. And now Jesus starts off here with a pretty weird statement. He says that he leaves and goes into Galilee, and it says in verse 44 of chapter 4, "For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country." Now, Jesus says this a couple of times. He says it, and we'll kind of look at this in just a minute in Matthew 13. Jesus says this even more specifically when he's in his hometown of Nazareth, and they kind of reject him. But he starts off with this weird saying that a prophet has no honor in his own country. And so I want to look at this for just a second and kind of unpack this and just like, what does this mean? We've kind of been flowing through this progression, and Jesus has been, leading people into belief and understanding of who he is and kind of pulling out faith and doing those kind of things. And then we get to this point where, Jesus has just left, like at this point, one of the biggest successes of his ministry. He's gone into Samaria, he's met with the Samaritans, and we don't have a number, but it says a lot of them in that city came to faith. And he's heading back in, back into Israel, back into his people, and this is what he says: a prophet has no honor in his own country. And so people take and make a lot of this, and we'll go through this in just a second. But I think what we need to look at is this phrase says more about the people than it does about him. That this is not about him not having honor or him not having power or him not having glory. What he's saying is that the people he's going to do not receive him as that way. They don't receive him as a prophet. They don't receive him as someone sent by God. Now, it is funny, though, if you'll look at verse 45, it says, "When he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him." Now, wait a second. Didn't Jesus just say they didn't receive him? Did he get mixed up? Did John contradict what Jesus is saying? Well, no. This is very much what we found out in the beginning here when we had Jesus cleansing the temple in the end of John 2 and the beginning of John 3, that they received him, but they didn't believe in him. Remember, it says that they believed in Jesus, but Jesus didn't entrust himself to them because he knew their heart. So this is the same thing. These people were excited that Jesus was coming back because they wanted to see the traveling magician. They wanted the show, They wanted to get front row tickets, because it's the hottest commodity in town. And so they're glad he's back, and it's kind of like, oh, well, what's he going to do now? What's he going to say now? They really loved it when he gave it to the temple people who were persecuting them and oppressing them. They loved that. And so Jesus comes back, and it says they receive him because they saw what he had done. But here's the problem. They were fixated on his signs and wonders, and they were not listening to him. And we'll key in on this in just a minute when we look at his dealing with the official the nobleman, because he says that, you people, all you care about signs and wonders. And so the reality is as Jesus comes back into his people, he understands that what they're interested in is not him. They're not interested in his message. They want his benefits. They want him to come in and heal like he's healed in other places. They want him to do another miracle like they heard about at the wedding. And this is one of those things that I think is important here, because they were fixated on that, but Jesus doesn't give in to that. Jesus doesn't give in and just say, oh, I'm going to give what the people want, and so I'm just going to continually heal everybody all the time, and that's all I'm going to do. In fact, we see him, and we'll talk about this more in a minute. In fact, we see him in times not heal everybody. In fact, the next miracle that we have at the pool of Bethesda, it says there are 5 porticos around this pool full of people who are sick. How many people did Jesus heal at that place? 1. What about everybody else? So here's the thing that we need to understand, that Jesus, he says, listen, you're fixated on the wrong things. He uses the signs and the wonders as a platform for his message. And John does this beautifully. Every time we see Jesus do a miracle or something like that, it's to set up teaching that he wants to do. In fact, we're going to see that in both our miracles tonight. He uses these opportunities and these displays of his glory and power to then teach. To say, okay, you want this, here's what I want. I want you to see something, and I want to correct something. And really what he's doing is to correct the understanding of the people about him and about his mission. He didn't come to heal. Now, healing was part of his mission, but that was not his mission. Clearly, his mission is to save and to lead people into an understanding that he's the Messiah and come to find faith in him. But also, his mission with these miracles and his message is to increase faith, to strengthen faith, and to deepen faith. If you look at the people in this miracle, in both of these miracles, that's what he does to all of them. He increases their faith, he strengthens their faith, and he deepens their faith. Now, here's the funny thing. This is exactly what we need all the time. And I think the fundamental problem that the Pharisees had, and the reason that they were looking at the wrong things, we kind of pointed that out earlier, is they didn't think they needed any increasing in their faith or strengthening or deepening. And so one of the scary places that we can get to is we become so familiar with the story of Jesus that we think we know it. And so we just say, oh, I got that, 100%. When Jesus wants to come and correct our understanding of who he is and deepen our understanding of his mission, he wants to increase our faith, to strengthen our faith, and to deepen our faith. Now, this idea of a prophet having no honor in his country, or what we're going to read in Matthew 13. If you got it, your Bible, turn to Matthew 13. I want to read a passage for you just so you can connect the dots here. Jesus comes into his hometown, and we get this really weird phrase that's connected to this same thing. In fact, he says a prophet has no honor in his country. In Matthew 13, I'm sorry, did I say Matthew 15? Yeah, Matthew 13, verses 53 through 58. But it says a prophet is not without honor in his own hometown. And then he says this in verse 58. He did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. And I want you to sit with that for a second. We're going to read this whole thing here so we can get some thing. But I want you to think about this. So Jesus is saying, I'm going to walk back into Israel, and these people don't accept me for who I am. And, they don't want to hear the message that I have to preach. And you could almost say, well, it seems like it's limiting his power to do the things that he's called to do because of their unbelief. And in fact, I will go ahead and tell you that there are people in the faith community who use these verses to say it is our faith that either gives God the opportunity to heal and to do miracles, or it's our lack of faith that keeps God from doing that. And I want to address this because, you could look at these things and misunderstand what Jesus is saying. And I want you to see tonight what you'll find is both of the individuals in this story had differing levels of faith. One guy didn't have faith at all. Jesus approached him and said, would you like to be well? And so I want to work through that for just a second. why does this seem to have an impact on his ministry? The fact that the people didn't respond to him the way that he thought that they should respond to him. Well, look in Matthew 13, 53 through 58. When Jesus had finished the parables, he departed from there. He came to his hometown and began teaching them in their synagogue. So they were astonished and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown and in his own household." And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. What is the connection between our faith and healing, or our faith and God's ability to work miraculous wonders? If you read this out of context, or you read the other statement that Jesus made and look at these things, it seems like it has a lot, right? It seems like there's a pretty big connection between our faith and God's ability to do work. Well, that's not what's happening here. And one of the things that I want you to see is, let's back up here. Basically, what's happening here is if this is the truth, if our faith is what determines whether God can do miraculous works in our life, that's a pretty scary proposition, don't you think? Why would you think I would say that? Why is it scary if our faith determines what God can do?
We don't have any faith unless it comes from God.
Right. We don't have faith unless it comes from God. What else? Why is it scary? Our faith is low sometimes, yeah. Faith isn't strong enough, yeah. And so what happens is that if that really is the proposition that he's talking about, it puts us in a scary place, because then it all depends on us. It doesn't depend on God's power and God's glory and his ability. It's on us to be able to believe and sustain belief so that God can do what he wants to do. And so here's the thing we need to look at. When we come to this, and you'll hear people say this, they'll use this passage and say, "See, this is all about your faith, and you've got to have faith, rock solid faith, or God can't heal." Well, here's the thing that you need to look at. And I didn't put all the verses in here. There was about 27 different verses. But healing is a huge part of Jesus' ministry. In fact, here's what we get when we look at the kind of scope of this through the New Testament. Most of the places he went in his ministry, there were times when he just healed. It would say things like this, that Jesus saw the people and he had compassion on them and he healed them all of their diseases and their sickness and their demon possession and all these kind of things. And then he would go to the next place and he would heal them all. And he did this and he did this. And so the reality is we see that healing is a huge part of his ministry. And what we also see is that the faith of the person didn't determine what Jesus did or didn't do. There was never a point where someone came or Jesus was going to heal someone and there was like, "I'm sorry, I don't have enough faith." And he's like, "Okay, you're right. You don't have enough faith. I'm sorry, I can't heal you." In fact, what we see and what we'll see tonight is every time that Jesus did a miracle, it was to increase, to strengthen, and to deepen faith. I've given you this example before, but it's a great example. Remember, we talk about Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. They come down off the mountain. Oh, fantastic. I messed that up. Oh, there we go. They come down off the mountain, and the rest of the disciples have been trying to cast out a demon from a child all night long into the next day. And the father runs up to Jesus and says, "If there's anything you can do, would you please do it?" And Jesus says, "If all things are possible for those who believe." To which the guy says, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." And Jesus says, "No, I'm not going to help your unbelief. You don't have enough faith." That's not in there, by the way. Jesus helped his unbelief. How did he help his unbelief? He healed the kid. So the problem with this is that God's power, God's healing, and Jesus' miraculous signs and wonders has nothing to do with our faith. Well, let me say it this way. It's not based on our faith. It has everything to do with increasing, strengthening, and deepening our faith. So if faith isn't the issue here, then what's happening? Well, I think one of the things that we need to look at is what these people are saying about Jesus. When you look in Matthew 13, and when he says that he didn't do many miracles there, we need to figure out why. What was it? Well, look at what they said. He came to his hometown, verse 54, began teaching them in their synagogue, so they were astonished and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas, and his sisters? Are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all of these things?" And they took offense. So one of the first things we see here is what happens, the reason that Jesus didn't do many miracles there is because they could not get over the fact of where did he get his wisdom and his miraculous power? The thing that they got hung up on was, we know this guy. We know this guy. Isn't he just Joseph's son? Isn't his mom Mary? I mean, didn't you have, James in your class at school? Don't you know his sisters? The reason that Jesus isn't doing miracles there is because the people didn't want to see miracles. They wanted to see them, but here's the thing. They were just like, I can't even put myself in a category to understand how you are doing the things that you're doing because you're just Jesus. They took offense at him. Now, that's a pretty interesting statement there. At this point, Jesus had been teaching and healing, evidently, because they've seen that. And so they're amazed and astonished to say, this guy has wisdom and he has miraculous power. Why would they take offense at him? Well, they saw him grow up, yeah. But think about it. Why would you take offense if somebody is wise and they're telling you true things? Why would you get mad about that? And if they're healing and doing these miraculous signs and wonder, why would you get mad about that? He's smarter than they were. What else? Somebody else said something? Yeah, why him? Why not me? Okay. George? Yeah, there's always that kind of fly in the ointment. There was always rumors about who Jesus' real dad was. It wasn't Joseph, I think what's happening here is Jesus didn't fit the mold of a prophet. Jesus didn't fit the mold of a rabbi. He didn't go to rabbi school. He wasn't classically trained. And he also really didn't fit the mold of Messiah. That was one of the big deals that the Jews had with him is that he didn't fit the mold that they understood about Messiah. He wasn't, he didn't ride in on a white horse with a sword and an army. And so what happens is, remember we talked about Jesus' miraculous signs and wonders are the platform for his message. He doesn't just do the signs and wonders for, hey, I'm going to do that as the road show. That's what we're going to do. He does them to teach. And so the reason he doesn't do them in his hometown is, do you think they wanted to hear the message that he was the Messiah? So why then would you do signs and wonders which verify who you are to convince people who don't want to believe? Yeah. Well, and he's like, I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you who I am. Yeah, so the problem here is that we look at this and we think, oh, well, these people just didn't have faith. No, it wasn't they didn't have faith. They actually had unbelief. They were rejecting the clear things that they saw, and so Jesus wasn't going to do more signs and wonders to convince people who were already decided who he was. They're convinced he's just Jesus. He's nobody special. So with all that aside, the reason I do that is, we talked about his message confirmed his message, or his miracles confirmed his message and his identity. And so what happens then when we come back to these things and we see Jesus do these miracles and it has nothing to do with their faith, but everything to do with increasing and strengthening and deepening their faith, then we begin to understand why miracles are important. Let me say it this way. I think I've been confusing up to this point. People will say, who aren't believers in Christ, if I could see the miracles that Jesus did from the Bible, if I could see them for myself, I would believe. Is that true? No, it's really not. Because the people in the Bible saw the miracles of Jesus in the Bible and they didn't believe. And so one of the things that we have to come to grips with, and this is hard as Christians, that miracles in and of themselves are not enough to move people forward in faith. Miracles are a platform to then give a message, and that's what Jesus does. But the miracle in and of itself is not enough for people to believe. In fact, if you look at the miracle of the nobleman when they heal his daughter, it says he believed Jesus' word, and then he hears that his child's alive, and he believed again, and then he believed and told, and his family believed. So which was it? When did he believe? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, you know? So the reality is that there was some belief that happened at the miracle, and then he listened to Jesus' message, and when the message was confirmed, there was a deeper belief that happens. And as he recounts the story to his family, I think that's when it really takes form. See what I'm saying? And so we have to come to understand that miracles in and of themselves are just the platform for his message. So let's keep working through, and we'll talk about the tale of two healings. Have I confused you guys? I feel like I'm being confusing tonight. So, okay. All right, so let's start with the first healing, and the healing of the nobleman's son, or the royal official. And one of the things that's pretty interesting about this healing is, again, Jesus is trying to correct this guy's understanding, and even the people around, understanding who he is and what his mission is. And what he's dealing with is this crowd, to them, believing is seeing, right? Or the easier way is seeing is believing. Basically, their kind of worldview was, until I can taste it, touch it, see it, examine it, it's not real. Does that sound familiar? Sounds very much like the world we live in today, where we say, okay, if science can't prove it, we can't believe it. And the reality is there's things that Jesus does that science cannot study, it cannot examine. And so if you're going to base all of your relationship to God and understanding of who he is on touch, taste, smell, examination, you're going to have a problem. And the reason I say that is, can you touch, taste, smell, examine God? It's not a trick question. Can you do that? No. Can you touch, taste, smell, examine, put salvation in a test tube? Okay. So what Jesus is doing, and what we're going to see, is he enters into this scenario where people are like, okay, we'll only believe it when we see it. And that's why they were so enamored with the signs. They wanted to see him do miracles because that gave them comfort to say, now I believe, right? It's almost like, remember when we left off with the Samaritan woman, she went and told them, this guy told me everything that I did and all this kind of stuff, and they were super excited. Let's go meet this guy. And then we get this great line where they said, now we really believe that he's the Savior, not just based off of what you said. Their belief had changed. And so it went from that believing as seeing or seeing as believing to like, no, we believe now, right? So here we have this royal official, and I want you to look at the conversation they have. It's very interesting. So it says, he came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and was imploring him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Now, let me give you a little some context here, because this is important. Capernaum and Cana are pretty far apart. They're about 25 miles distance apart. Now, that's nothing to us. I mean, that's like driving a little bit past Portales. We do that all the time, no big deal. But I want you to think about that time. Making that kind of trip, was probably 2.5, 3 day adventure, And so this guy heard that Jesus was heading to Cana, and he had to set out about the same time that he did to meet him there. So this wasn't like this guy had walked out of his house and came over and saw Jesus. No, this guy made a concerted trip to come see Jesus. Now, let's put this in context. His son is at the point of death. Where do you want to be when your child's dying? With your son. How hard would it have been to say, I'm going to leave my child in the hand of my servants and I'm going to go? Was he guaranteed he was going to get there in time? Was he guaranteed that Jesus was going to do anything? So this guy makes a huge investment to come. And so we get this thing where he begins to implore him. I love this. Verse 47, when he heard that Jesus came out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and he was imploring him. I mean, you can picture that, can't you? Weeping, pulling on Jesus. I need you to come. I need you to come right now. I need you to do this. Come to my house. My son's dying. I need you to come. You know? And it says, for he was at the point of death. And then verse 48, I want you to think for just a second and listen to what Jesus says in 48 and 49. Put yourself in this nobleman's position and see how you would feel. He's imploring him, and Jesus looks out over this guy to all the people who are standing around, and here's what he says. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. And the royal official said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. And Jesus says, go, your son lives. Is that the interaction that you want with Jesus? If you're a grieving parent and you're afraid your kid's about to die, is that the interaction you want with Jesus? What do you want Jesus to do? Drop everything and let's go. Not use this as a teaching moment for me and for everybody else. So here's what happens. He comes and he has this issue where he's, saying, I want you to come. I want you to come. And I love this phrase. Here's what he says. I want you to come. The official comes to Jesus and says, I want you to come. And here's what he's saying. I can't believe that you're going to heal my son until I see you do it. Think about it. In those days, and even now, there are people who claim that their healing gifts reside with them, right? And so people say things like, put your hand on the television on my hand, and I'll heal you. But it resides with them. And if it resides with them, they don't have the power or the authority without being in the presence of someone to heal them. Do you get what I'm saying? And so what this guy is saying is, I don't think you have the power and the authority to heal my kid from here. You've got to come and literally be in the room, literally put your hand on him. Now, he's not saying Jesus doesn't have the power to heal. What he's saying is, I can't believe that you have the power and the authority to heal him from here. And he says, I want you to come. And then Jesus says, I want you to go. I mean, now we'll back up and talk about in just a second him talking about this faithless generation. But just take that for a moment. I want you to come. I need you to come. I need you to be here. I need to watch you put your hands on my kid. I need to hear you say the magic mumbo jumbo that you say that's going to heal him. I need you to do that. And Jesus says, I need you to go. I need you to go in faith. Now, before he says that, he says, you people, you're just so concerned. All you want, unless you see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. Now, at first, it sounds harsh, but the reality is, remember, we talked about he's using a miracle as the platform for a message. He's using this to correct their understanding of who he is and his mission. Now, reread that and think about what he's saying to this guy and to the people. This guy says, you have to come. You have to be in the room because I simply can't believe it until I see it. And he's saying, you simply need to believe it, and then you'll see it. I want you to go. Now, this is a pretty difficult thing, and I read this as a parent, and the guy leaves. The guy leaves. This is an amazing thing. Look at what it says. Jesus said to him, go, your son lives. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started off. And as he was now going down, his slaves met him, saying that his son was living, and he inquired of them the hour when he began to get better. They said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. So the father knew it was at that hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household. I don't know if I would have had the faith to walk away. Remember, this isn't around the corner. This isn't 5 minutes away. 25 miles. He's going to have to walk another day and a half, almost 2 days, to get back home. That's faith. That's Hebrews 11:1, the evidence of things hoped for, or the assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. I mean, how easy is it for you to say, go, your son lives? I just said it. And the reality is, he had to trust that if he got home, his son was still going to be alive. What if he wasn't? Is he going to be able to track Jesus back down again and, be mad at him? Maybe sometime down the road, but I mean, that's, it's over at that point. Think about that walk. Think about heading back home, and all you have is go, your son lives. Nothing, no magic amulet in your hand, no powder or cream that you can give him, no magic incantation, a word. That's it, a word. Go. Your son lives. See, here's the thing. I love this because I think what Jesus is trying to do for him, he's trying to do for us, is what do we trust? What do we put our hope and trust in? We put it in things seen, We want tangible things to say, this is how I know I'm God's, this is how I know he saved me, and Jesus wants us to take his word. I mean, here's the thing. You do realize the only proof you really have that Jesus saves you is because he said he would. I mean, we can talk about evidences and things, and those help, but reality, at the end of the day, what are you basing your eternity on? His word. His word. Christ's word that his life, his death, his burial, and resurrection are enough. So the guy goes. And I love this. I love this. If you catch this. So he goes, and the guys come to meet him. They're running to meet this guy. Because here's the thing that happened. They don't know anything that's going on. They don't know the conversation that he's had with Jesus. They're home taking care of the boy. And all of a sudden, if it's a fever, whatever it is, he's in a coma, whatever it is, over. It says immediately at that moment, he got better. Now think about it. These guys have no clue what's going on, but they're rejoicing over the fact that this kid's better, right? And so they want to run tell, this nobleman, hey, come home, he's better, he wants to see you. And he sees them and meets them. And his first question is, when did it happen? Now, think about being a servant and your master, I'm sure he rejoiced that his son was better. But the first question being, when did it happen? Why are you asking that? Why do you care? Yeah. But here's the thing. The reason he cared was he wanted to know, did it match up the time when Jesus said it? It's assurance. It's evidence that Jesus' word is enough. And they tell him, it happened at this time. And he was like, that's exactly the moment that Jesus told me. And I look at what you get. He believed. He believed again. He believed, and so did his household. The father knew, verse 53, it was at that hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives. He himself believed. Increasing, strengthening, deepening his faith. Now listen, all of this had to be a faith journey. He had to have faith to go, to meet Jesus. He had to have faith to leave when Jesus told him to leave. That's a lot. But what happened here is that moment where it goes from, okay, we'll see what happens. I'm willing to try anything. Because when you get desperate, you're willing to try anything, right? It goes from desperation to wow, but to complete and total transformation. The lights click on, everything comes together. I don't need signs and wonders to believe. I just need his word. His word is true. I believe that, and now he believes. Now, yeah, Betty?
But I think it's sweet of Jesus to say, your son lives. He didn't tell you just to go.
Right.
And that's so like God to give us that hope.
It is. Yeah, she said it's sweet that Jesus told him your son lives. That does make the trip better. You're right. So again, when we talk about this, which came first? When did he believe? And that's the hard thing, is that he believed some things all through this process, but I think it wasn't until the end that he really believed in Jesus and believed on Jesus that he can do something. Because it says not only did he believe, but his whole household. How did his household come to believe? His testimony. Now, if you guys are listening on Wednesday nights, what happens every time someone has an encounter with Jesus and they believe on him in the Gospels? What's the first thing they do? They tell someone else. Does that happen in our churches today? Not like it should. And I don't know why that is. It seems so natural. There was no coaching. There was no discipleship training. He didn't go to EE. He didn't learn the faith program. He didn't learn all the gospel presentations. What did he share? This is what he did. This is what he said. And this is what happened, right? And so the reason I keep harping on this is not to make you feel guilty. It's to help you recognize that you have all the training that you need. You had an encounter with Jesus. And you can take the encounter with Jesus that you've had and share it with somebody else, and that's enough, right? So, it says, verse 54, this again is a second sign that Jesus performed when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. Now, the next thing, we transition back to Jerusalem in chapter 5. There's a feast that comes up, and there's a lot of kind of consternation on what feast it was, but most likely it was probably Passover. Because they're just really in an uproar about the Sabbath. And again, put a pin in that. We'll come back to that next week because it plays into the rest of the stuff that we're going to talk about. But so Jesus comes back to Jerusalem at this feast. A lot of people are there. And he goes to the sheep gate. He goes to a place that's very familiar to people of that time. And there was a pool. Now, again, I want us to see this isn't a coincidence. This isn't happenstance. This is the same thing as what happened with the lady in Samaria. He had to go there. He had a divine appointment that he needed to make. And the divine appointment was he's going to come in, he was going to correct this guy, and not only this guy, but the Pharisees and the people in Jerusalem's understanding. So he shows up, and here's this guy, along with who knows how many hundreds or thousands of people that are laying around these pools waiting for this miracle to happen. Now, let me say real quick, if you look in verses 3 and 4, when it talks about, the sick, the blind, all that, and that the angel would come touch the water, we have no proof that this actually happened. What we think this is an old wives' tale that grew up in the nation of Israel. Maybe that happened one time, who knows? But there was something that happened. People would get in this water and they would say, oh, miraculously, I feel better. And so it became a place that everybody went to in the hopes of receiving healing. Now, here's the important thing that we need to look at here when we come to this. And so we have this thing where he asked the invalid, do you want to be well? And remember, we talked about in all these things, Jesus sometimes moves past the physical to talk about the spiritual. Asking someone who's at a place where there's a bunch of maimed, sick, diseased, demon-possessed people, do you want to be well? No, duh. It's why I'm here. But Jesus wasn't asking about physically. Physical wasn't even really the part of the problem. It was part of the problem, but it wasn't the root of the problem. And again, this is the whole point of what he's going to be doing here, is helping them move past this to say, there's a condition you can be in that's much worse than being an invalid. And we don't even really know what's going wrong with this guy. We know he's had it for 38 years. We don't know if it's he can't walk, if he can't breathe. I mean, there's something. He says because he tries to get in by himself and he can't. He could have arthritis. He could have who knows what, right? It seemed like he had some function but not enough function. But what happens is we get to this pool of Bethesda and this story about the angel and all these kind of things. This represents these people trusting in something other than God. Now, they'll say it's an angel of the Lord who comes and does this, and he'll stir the waters, and then first come, first serve. Whoever can get in first gets it. Does that sound like God at all? No. And so here's the thing. They're no longer going to the temple. They're no longer seeking help. They've set their face to the pool, and that's their hope. God is not their hope. God is not their healer. God is not their Savior. If I can just get to the water. And so Jesus wants to show this guy and the Jews, and here's the thing, how weird is it that the Jews were so mad and so angry about a lot of things, but they didn't care that these people were out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, putting their faith and hope and trust in something other than God. It doesn't make them irate at all. In fact, they probably walked past those people many times and were just like, you deserve whatever you got. You did something, your parents did something to put you in this place. God doesn't love you. God's never going to heal you. You know, we got no time for you. No mercy. Yeah, no mercy. And so Jesus upends all of that. And so here's the thing. He comes to this guy and he says, do you want to get well? I wish I could have been there when Jesus asked that guy that question, because, I mean, you can almost hear the guy have a little attitude. Like, that's why I'm here. But look at what he says. He's been there for 38 years. Think about that for a second. In his mind, we don't know how far away he is from the pool, but let's just say he's 15 feet. It might as well be 1,000,000 miles. He's that close to deliverance, but it never comes. And so Jesus says, do you want to be well? And the guy says, verse 7, sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred, but when I am coming, another steps down before me. Now, do you hear what's implicit in what the guy says? I got nobody to help me. He recognized he couldn't do it on his own. He'd seen that. We don't know how many times a year that this would happen. We don't really know. Maybe it was more than once, or who knows. But for 38 years, think about that constant defeat for 38 years. It's hopeless. I'm hopeless. I'm helpless. Nothing to be done. And so he tells Jesus, there's nobody here to help me. And I feel like this is one of those moments like where he had with the Samaritan woman, where she said, oh, I know when the Messiah gets here, he's going to tell us everything that we need to know, and he's going to know all things. And he says, the person that you're speaking to, I'm he. I almost want to see Jesus smiling in this guy's face and just be like, you have no idea. I'm here. Person you've been waiting for, the healing that you've been waiting for, here it is. Now, again, I want you to see, Jesus says what seems to be a very easy thing. And he's doing this on purpose. He says, get up, take your pallet, and go. Now, I'm sure there have been people who've walked by and told him, hey, lazy bum, get up. Get up. You're not sick. Get up, get out of here. What's the difference? What was it in what Jesus said and how he said it that this guy was like, I'm going to get up? Authority, compassion, kind of, who knows? But look at this interaction. He says, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Immediately, the man became well. Now, notice it doesn't say immediately he got up. It says immediately he became well, then he got up. I wonder what that was like. Now, I want you to think about this too. Don't forget, there's tons of people right now that are wanting to be healed. And they know this guy because they've been there as long as this guy and maybe longer. What do you think started happening when this guy jumped up and grabbed his pallet? Yeah, a commotion. Yeah, the commotion happens because here's the little clue. It says he couldn't tell the Pharisees who healed him because Jesus disappeared in the crowd. So boom, everybody explodes. We want to know what's going on. All the attention's on him, and Jesus just leaves. But get up and walk. And so he gets up and he goes to walk. And one of the things that happens here, he says, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Jesus is, again, showing his power and authority. He didn't touch him. He didn't say some crazy juju magic over him. He didn't do anything. He just said, get up. Same way he told the guy to go home. Your son's well. What's happening is that he's exerting his power and his authority to help people understand I'm God. Because they'd never seen a healer like that before. All the healers they had seen do all the magic tricks and all the stuff and they make the production in the show. Notice how Jesus didn't even draw attention to himself when he came in. Walked up to the guy, do you want to be healed? Do you want to get well? Yes, sir, I do. He's well. And then he disappears. So he says, do you want to get well? Get up, pick up your pallet, and go. Now, what happens with this, again, we see the Pharisees get really bent out of shape because they see this guy. And we'll talk about this more next week when we talk about the Sabbath, because we have two similar things that happen. Jesus heals this guy on the Sabbath, and he heals a blind guy on another visit on the Sabbath. And they see them, and they know them. They know them. They know who that guy is. He's been over there for 38 years. They know the blind guy because he was blind from birth. And he was always sitting around asking for people to help. And he was begging and all those kind of things. And so instead of going, wow, what happened to you? They say, why are you carrying your pallet? Don't you know it's a Sabbath day? Don't you know that God doesn't like it when you do that? Like, dude, you have totally missed the point. How far off do you have to be when a clear miracle happens in front of your face and the only thing you can worry about is this guy's breaking a rule that you made up? So what happens is Jesus comes back and says something to him. I want to read this to you. Verse 14, it says, Jesus found him in the temple later and said, behold, you have become well. I love how he states the obvious, like this guy didn't know. Hey, you're well. Like Jesus wasn't there, and he didn't do it. But just a reminder, hey, you've become well. And then he says, listen to this. I don't know if this strikes you funny, but here's what he says. Behold, you've become well. Do not sin anymore so that nothing worse happens to you. Is that creepy? Is that a threat? What's he saying? Like, if this guy sins, he's going to get sick again and die? Or was it because he sinned that he was in this place? No, here's what Jesus is doing. Jesus is doing the same thing that he did, or we're going to see in John chapter 8, where the woman caught in adultery gets thrown down in front of him, and he bends down and says, is there anyone here to condemn you? And she says, no. And he says, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. Here's what he's saying to this guy. He's trying to help this guy understand that he needs to give up sinning. That this guy thought the worst condition in his life was having the disease that he had that kept him from being a able-bodied person to do all the things that everybody else could do. And Jesus said, no, the condition that you have that you need to care about is sin. You do have a disease, and it's called sin. And so don't sin. And in fact, here's what he's saying. Don't sin. Don't continue in sin, because the outcome of that disease is much worse than lying on a cot for 38 years. When he says, don't go on sinning or stop sinning so that nothing worse happens to you, here's what he's saying. He's drawing out this guy's faith. If you really want to be made well, if you really want to be made whole, sin has to stop. Sin has to stop. You have to follow me. You have to believe me. And we're going to see this guy kind of work through that a little bit later in the chapter. But that's what Jesus is drawing out here. See, for the Pharisees and everybody else, they looked at all those people at the porticos of Bethesda, and they could just see sin everywhere, And they looked at these physical diseases and says, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. It's so awful and so terrible. And what Jesus says is, no, the physical reality is not bad at all. Look, I can fix that just like that. It's the spiritual reality that's much worse. And in fact, the people who were the most sick in this story weren't the people at the pool. It wasn't the guy on the cot. It was the Pharisees who, when they see God working, say, why are you walking around with your mat on Saturday? Their spiritual disease was much worse than the people that they looked down on and said, I can't, your physical disease is a curse of God. No, it's your spiritual disease. So, here's what we have. We have these two miracles where Jesus comes in to correct their understanding, to use these miracles as a platform for his message, to increase, to strengthen, and to deepen their faith. And when we come back next week, we're going to deal with the question. So I'm going to go ahead and provide it for you, and you can start thinking about it. They get really mad that Jesus heals on the Sabbath day. That's their whole thing. And they spend a couple of chapters. We're going to deal with this for a couple of chapters. They just cannot get over that. And so the thing of it is Jesus breaking the law when he heals on the Sabbath day? Is he doing something wrong? And we're going to work through that next week. So I want you to kind of prep, and I want to hear what you think. I want you to think about that question, and I want to hear what you think next week. Is Jesus wrong for healing on the Sabbath? Really, what's the purpose of the Sabbath? Why do we have that? So we'll kind of do some of that before we dig into some of the other things. All right, well, let's pray, and we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for these wonderful pictures that we get to see of you working in our life to increase, to strengthen, and deepen our faith in you. And I pray that happened tonight. That in some way, there was something tonight that increased our faith, that strengthened our faith, that deepened our faith in you, that we can then take and go share with someone else. And Father, I just pray that we would never forget that you have all power, all authority, all might to do anything and everything that you want, and everything that you do is right. All you have to do is say the word. And so, God, we trust you, we thank you, and we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.